What's up, everybody? This is McAllister's podcast. I'm your host, always, Coleman McAllister, here today with another super solo episode. I apologize. I know I've been telling you guys for a while, we're going to get guests. And that just hasn't been happening. It's been a lot of things have been falling through. Honestly, I mean, a lot, I will say a couple of them have been myself canceling just because, you know, I'm in the middle of the week and the week's busier than I thought it was, or I come down with some illness or my mental health just isn't great. Just there's a variety of reasons why people, you know, can't make podcasts work. So that's been happening a lot lately, and I apologize, but we are going to get some guests in. I think if anything, we're going to get, I know we're getting Obs in here pretty soon. I'm thinking about getting the Unhinged crew in just to kind of cross and merge those roads. But until then, I thought I would do another solo episode, talk about some of the stuff going on, both in the state of Iowa mainly, and some of the things that are, you know, going on in our federal government. So with that being said, the thing that is really crazy that just happened, this happened last night. Not even really crazy. I guess the crazy aspect, and we'll get to this in a second, is, well, actually, let's just start with that. So this happened, let's see, this was supposed Friday, March 28th at 12:57 p.m. Reynolds skips UNI ribbon cutting as protests draw hundreds. More than 100 protesters gathered. Did I say that? More than 100 protesters gathered outside the challenge their policies and an expected presence. Reynolds was slated to speak at the opening of UNI's newly renovated Applied Engineering building, but event organizers announced at the start that she sends her regrets. A pre-recorded video message from the governor was played instead. No reason was given for her absence. Wow, I thought she would at least give a reason. And Iowa's News Now did not receive a response from her office, of course. Because why would they? Because she doesn't have to, right? And this is kind of the point that I wanted to start on. This is why I'm titling the episode, what I'm titling it, is, you know, I think this podcast forever has been a huge critic of Kim Reynolds. You know, Iowa has never been known to have a great government, great governors, right? But Kim Reynolds is just the absolute worst. You know, dialing back the clocks, you know, before, or not, I shouldn't even say before, but, you know, even after all the, you know, the things with her DUI record being completely expunged from all Iowa records, right? And, you know, the hypocrisy of her stance on cannabis while, you know, she has that history, how she, you know, used her government power to really, you know, not take the consequences really of her DUI things, right? And, you know I just got in a bunch of heat talking about the DUI stuff on Unhinged, like how, you know, I'm not pro DUI, I'm not pro WI, I'm an anarchist, I don't believe in those things. However, I think it's important to point out the hypocrisy when you have a governor who puts these laws into effect and then they themselves break the laws, not only break the laws themselves, but are not held accountable, do not have any recourse, or I should say have all the recourse in the world to avoid those consequences, right? When any other citizen of Iowa in that same situation would be, I mean, their life would be ruined, right, with a DUI. But not only was this woman's life not ruined, she is currently the governor of Iowa. She's been the governor of Iowa since what, 2016, 2017? And she just doesn't seem to be stopping. We're going to have an election here next year. We'll see what happens. But, you know, with the hardcore Iowa religious Republican base that is in the state, people who would just mindlessly vote Republican because that's what they do. Not like the Democratic Party's any better, right? But, you know, there's no thought into it, right? They're just like R all the way, right? She's probably going to win. She's probably going to win again. That's the sad reality. Hopefully that's not the case. Maybe she'll decide not to run. I mean, that would at least, I mean, I guess this was my previous point. In 2017, when she became the governor, God, who was the guy before? I can't remember. Branstad, maybe? Terry? I don't remember. But the governor before her was promoted by Trump to, I think, the director of foreign affairs or something like that. And Governor Reynolds was handpicked by him to replace him. So Kim Reynolds never got into this position by a vote. She was literally just handpicked, and people just continued to vote for her, not because they really voted for her, but they find the values of that party so important that they just need to continue it. I don't know. It's bullshit. But I think I wanted to highlight this first story. And then here's a roundabout way. I know I've been talking the roundabout way getting to the story, right? This is when you really start to see dystopian governments, when you really start to see the bridge between the public discourse and the government start to go further apart. That's when things get really dangerous. That's when the power of the government is really truly out of the hands of the people. I mean, it already is just as like a baseline, right? Like that's just how the whole system works. Like the people, we have this delusion that like the law abides by the people or is in control of the people. That's just not the case. It never has been. Even if you read back to like the revolutionary times of, 1776 and all that. Shortly after that, I mean, all the liberty principles that started that war in the first place ended up just faltering because, people were like, oh, we need a government, right? And this is the same logic that has been coursing throughout history, right? It's something that's probably never going to stop. I wish it would, but it probably won't. But anyways, when you see something like this where Kim Reynolds, and I don't really care, I don't really give a shit if she shows up to this thing ultimately, but like the fact that she was going to go to this event, was going to be met with criticism, knew ahead of time that she was going to be met with protests and criticism. She didn't show up. She simply didn't show up. And instead, she played a video. I mean, how further away from 1984 do you have to be, right? The fact that she's just putting out, I mean, that's V for Vendetta shit. That's like, hey, the government's just going to put out a video. And it's the same thing that happened during COVID. She did the same thing during COVID. She just like, every day she was like, here's what you can do today. Here are the restrictions. I mean, this is hand in hand with this right here. I think this is just what I have. This just shows what I've been saying about this woman, that she doesn't want to actually abide by the people. She does not care about Iowans. She cares about her and her dollar, like her pocket, right? That's all her own interests. That's all she cares about. She does not care about Iowans. If she did actually care about Iowans, she would have gone. She would have spoken, right? And look, I mean, there aren't really that many politicians out there who like do face their supporters. So like, whatever, right? To some extent, it's like, okay, like it's not really that surprising or like that egregious. But at the same time, it's just a symbol. It's symbolic as to what this government is just continually, like the steps that this government is continually doing. And, Iowa is such a weird middle ground where it's like, in some instances, like, I know they took out the traffic lights, which like kind of gives more power to the people, right? And gives the government less ability to like, just give people arbitrary tickets. And, like things where like you're cutting these government programs, right? Like as an anarchist, I think that's good. Like, so the public in itself hates it, right? But like, it's worth critically thinking about, right? Like, okay, just cutting these benefits, it might, and we're going to talk about some of the SNAP stuff that got taken away recently too. But, like these benefits, get taken away, right? And that is disparaging to people, people who rely on that. They don't have that anymore. And that's obviously going to cause problems. But I think it's worth, in the short term, I should say, but I think it's worth looking at the bigger picture where you see, the economy, it will actually help the economy if you lessen spending, if you lessen taxes. That makes things cheaper. And then those families who rely on that are now more able to afford that, right? And And that's a long-term goal, and people don't like that. People want the short term. They want the Band-Aid solution. So that's a very hard thing. As someone with my political views, it's hard to interact with people and not come off as an asshole. I've said this a million times. People who know the show know that. But anyway, let's get into this. Let's just talk about some of the... So instead of going to this protest or this ribbon cutting ceremony, I think it was, what was it, for a building? It was like the agricultural building. I think that's what I just read. Whatever. Like, instead of doing that, she essentially did what government does best and just create laws and restrictions and, take people's freedoms away. So I thought we would just kind of go over some of the laws that were passed. And I won't lie, a lot of these seem kind of, not a lot of them, but there were a couple of them that weren't really that. I mean, it was just mostly redefining stuff. Like the H-260, the bill for act relating to Iowa lottery. That was basically just like redefining things as like just the, little legal thing. I don't understand how that impacts, taxes in the lottery. I'm sure there's some negative aspect to that. I'm not educated in that. Driver qualifications. There were a lot of things in here that were just kind of like, okay, like I just don't really care about. However, there were at least three different bills that were passed that I found very alarming. We're going to go through each one. The first one I found very alarming was Senate File 605, which is an act relating to state income tax withholdings and winnings from sports wagering and including effective date provocations. All winnings derive here. Let's read here. All winnings derive from slot machines operated pursuant to this chapter are Iowa earned income and are subject to state and federal income tax laws. An amount deducted from winnings for payment of the state tax, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a huge red flag for me, right? This is just this is once again the government coming in, seeing something in the this gambling market, this very profitable gambling market around sports, and is going to sink their hands in and say, we want a piece. They're the mob. That's what the mob does. The mob sees a business, they go in, they're like, hey, we want some of that, right? And sometimes it's voluntary, a lot of times it's not. That's almost in a way that I almost like would give in some cases the mafia is honestly like is less corrupt in that way, right? Because I mean, in some cases there's at least some element of choice, right? Like if you were a business and you want protection from the mob, that would be you voluntarily going to the mob. Right now, the mob, they act on methods that are involuntary, like if somebody's giving you a hard time or whatever, they'll go fuck them up, and that's not great either. Violence isn't good. So, but anyways, I mean, it's apples. I mean, it's not apples and oranges, but my point is the government is like the worst form of mafia. It is the worst form of mob activity. And what we're seeing with this income tax being put on gambling is just another extension of that. And, and this almost like I just gave them all this credit for cutting these government programs or whatever, but then they just do the exact opposite. And it's like, okay, but so you do something good and then you do something way worse. And like, it's just maddening. It's fucking maddening. It's like and again, this is another thing the government does. They throw a bone. They're like, okay, we're going to give you a bone. We're going to make you happy. And at the same time, while you're distracted with that bone, we're just going to fucking do this terrible thing. We're going to just increase the income tax on the gambling. And that's not even it too. Let's go to this next one. This next bill that I found alarming. House File 181, an act prohibiting open containers of beverages containing basically cannabinoids in the passenger area of motor vehicles and highways and making penalties applicable. So essentially, I mean, it's we won't read the whole thing. I kind of skimmed through some of these before we started, so I have kind of a general idea of what these bills are putting in practice. Basically, this is just equating. They're gonna have, if you have a container of THC beverage, that's gonna be the same as like if you have a open container of alcohol, which I didn't do the research. I really should have, but I almost wonder if I've heard that like the whole thing with COVID where Kim Reynolds made it you were allowed to basically take open containers from like if you wanted to go pick up, go to a bar and pick up a cocktail and then they just give it to you in a plastic cup and a straw and you just went home, that was legal, right? And I mean, there's a lot of wiggle room in that, right? Like if you get pulled over and you're like 3 deep and you have one that you're like, hey, yeah, I'm just going home, and like it gives it. And that I look like take away that restriction. Right? Like we shouldn't have that restriction in the first place. But then you're gonna on the substance, the cannabinoids, which I think it's indisputable. I mean, I think this was maybe speculation 10 years ago. I think now it's like not even speculative. The consequences, the negative effects of cannabinoids can't even hold a candle to the negative consequences of alcohol. So to see another restriction like this, it's just her trying to take a stab at the cannabis industry in Iowa, which has a lot of potential to really help a lot of people, create another market where people can, start their own businesses and make an income that way. And it positively impacts the community because you're giving this, what is medicine for a lot of people. You're giving that to the community. But instead of doing any of that, instead of doing the right thing, she's just going to keep putting restrictions on this. And the hypocrisy for her to put these restrictions on cannabinoids without doing anything with alcohol, it's just maddening. It's maddening. Like I said, it's just this woman. I cannot stand this fucking woman. I would love to have her on a podcast. I wouldn't do anything violent, okay? But I would ask her this shit, right? But this is the thing that she doesn't have to. People make the argument. They're like, hey, if you are unhappy with what your government is doing, write them a letter. And it's the most retarded shit. I could write Kim Reynolds personally 3 letters. I'll say 3 letters a day. I spend all day writing letters. Hey, Kim Reynolds, legalize cannabis. Here are 10 reasons why it should be this way. I could do that 3 times a day, every day for a year, and I guarantee nothing will change. Not a single thing will change. I could go around my community. I could get my entire street, my entire neighborhood to do the same thing, and that one thing would happen. It's such a ridiculous proposition that people actually think that works. I've talked to people and they're like, just write your Congress, write your government. They don't give a fuck. They don't care. They're going to keep doing whatever the fuck they want. It's maddening that people actually, if you want to actually make change, you you just have to voice your, do something like this, do a podcast, post on social media, get your friends and family and all that aware of what's going on and, put out a voice that way. Not even from voting, not like, oh, once every 2 or 4 years, we're going to give you this chance to give your voice. No, man, start putting your voice out now. I mean, you look at this is more of a, federal example, right? But remember, 10 plus years ago when they tried to put these, tried to put these restrictions on the internet to I don't even remember exactly what it was. But I think it was something akin to where people would have to pay to go to certain websites, right? Like if I wanted to go to Facebook on Google, I would have to pay to go on Facebook. Even though I'm already paying for internet and I paid for the computer, I'm going to have to additionally pay to visit that website. And that was something that did not pass because the public, rightfully so, is like, we're not going to do that, right? And this is why the market is is so much better of a method than this government system. You want to talk about giving voice to the people? This is actually the way to do it. Okay, last one, or not the last one, but the last bill that we'll talk about that I found. I mean, honestly, I was a little bit relieved because when I first saw that they were changing some of the basically what this does, House File 182. an act relating to the controlled substances, including certain controlled substances schedules and precursor substances reporting requirements, making penalties applicable and including effective date provisions. Now, they at least did not target cannabis with this, which I was expecting they would. So, I mean, that's at least good. However, it seems that a lot of, and I mean, you can just see as I'm scrolling down briefly, there has to be over 50 different, just variations of different molecules. And it seems to be related to opioids and amphetamines. Specifically fentanyl seems to be the one that they're really targeting in that. Again, I've talked about the war on drugs plenty, so we won't go into it too much, but everybody knows my position on that. They should all be legalized. To put any kind of restrictions on these drugs is, it's just, it just doesn't really help the problem. It makes things worse. I mean, similarly to the DUI argument, you're just ruining people's lives. And, DUI, with the DUI, you can at least make the argument that, like, they're on the road, and that could potentially hurt someone. That's at least an argument. I don't agree with it still, but, like, that's at least, like, okay, I can see where you're coming from with that. When it's someone peacefully in their home, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's fentanyl. I don't care if it's meth. I don't care if it's heroin. I don't care how they ingest it. If they're peacefully in their home doing that, that's their decision. There's no reason why they should be penalized for that. And look, I mean, fentanyl has been around for a long time. It's a drug that's been used in hospitals. My fiance, she worked in the hospital, and she would carry fentanyl they would literally give her fentanyl, and she would carry it around. It's like a legitimate medical thing. And now, I don't know how the restrictions on this have changed. Maybe this is something I should have figured out before I did the podcast. That's my bad. But it seems that there's a valid argument. There's a valid pro-fentanyl argument. If you have cancer, if you have some kind of chronic illness, even if you're depressed, even if you have some kind of mental ailment that, makes your life so difficult that you need this drug to calm down, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. You can make the argument maybe that is not the best, for the mental health aspect, right? Like, hey, maybe therapy would be better than using fentanyl. Sure. However, we should not require people to do this. This is the problem. Choice. You're taking the choice away. And this is what government does. And I've been already talking about this for 23 minutes. So we'll just end that on that. But I shame on Kim Reynolds. Shame on the state of Iowa. This is very discouraging, very disappointing. I don't see things turning up. I don't see things getting better as this administration continues. I think the whole thing that happened at UNI is just one example of why Kim Reynolds does not care. She does not care about the people of Iowa. The government does not care about the people of Iowa. The space between government action and the voice of the people is growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger every day that this administration continues. And Iowans need to wake up to that. They need to be scared. They need to be scared. Because I'm telling you, it sounds hyperbolic. People are going to think I'm crazy. But the steps between this and showing up to your door and throwing you in a truck and going to a cage for XYZ reason, like what's happening in Britain right now, right? Where you can, if you make a post on Facebook that the government doesn't like, they will come to your house and they will arrest you. There are multiple videos of that having happened. And again, people are going to think I'm hyperbolic, but the steps between what's happening now in Iowa government and that are few and far in between. It is not going to take that much more for the Iowa government to get to that point. Okay. Let's talk about one more thing that has happened recently with the government of Iowa, which I saw I think this happened, I'm recording this on Saturday, I'm going to put it on Monday, so this happened Thursday, March 27th. Iowa House passes bill to limit food, beverages Iowans receiving SNAP benefits could buy. Low-income Iowans are closer to facing restrictions in what items they could buy with the federal food assistance dollars under the legislation the Iowa House passed Wednesday. Anti-hunger activists. Okay. Is anybody pro-hunger? Anti-hunger, what the fuck? Okay. Anti-hunger advocates have pushed back on requirements in House File 970 that the state requests a federal waiver that would restrict what products Iowans can buy with supplemental nutrition assistance program dollars, but cheered the bill's $1 million appropriation to support the Double Up Food Bucks program that expands across the produce. So and the bill passed in the House with 56 to 40 vote, with 8 Republicans joining to do this. And this seems to be similar to what RFK just recently did, which is basically he took away, for lack of a better term, unhealthy foods that are high in sugar, soda. And I personally agree. If you're really to use what SNAP benefits are, the idea of welfare or helping people out, you should not be giving them something that's not going to help them, right? Like sugary foods, soda, these are not things that are necessary and needed. That's like, hey, I have some extra money, I'll go buy a soda. That's not, hey, I'm dying of thirst, I need soda, right? These are two very different ideas. And, like I was saying before, people get very defensive about this kind of stuff, especially the people that rely on these services. I've always said, and I say to this day, it is impossible. I'm saying again, impossible to have a good faith conversation with somebody about government that is involved in government, whether they profit in terms of they have a position in government or they receive benefits like social, SNAP or Social Security or 401k or whatever. Those people are always going to side with government because it's in their best interest. And look, at face value, that makes sense, right? Like if I owned a Casey's, let's say I own Casey's and I had a reporter come to me and say hey, here's 10 things that are bad about Casey's. What, you think I'm going to agree? You think I'm going to be like, yeah, man, that's no, I'm going to either walk away. That's what most people would do, right? They just walk away I'm not going to talk about that. Or, they would deny it, right? And that's all fair game, right? Like you own a business. Obviously you don't want to tarnish that. Now, if that reporter wants to go out and give that information and people can then decide for themselves, I don't really have any control over that, right? I can only do what I can do. But again, that's fine in a free market. But when you do that from a government standpoint, it's very problematic. But anyways, I do think of this as a positive step forward, ultimately. I don't believe in the idea of food stamps. I don't believe in the idea of welfare. I think it keeps people poor. I think it keeps people in the same cycle and system. The safety net argument is just flawed. I think if people want to actually provide a safety net, start a charity, be charitable, give your money to people, take your dollar and giving it to someone, that helps way more than this system that steals money from people, that's based on theft and violence, and takes that money and gives it to people. That's not charity. That's just force. That's just theft. That's Robin Hood. It's the idea of Robin Hood, right? And that's not stealing is wrong. It doesn't matter if it's going from the poor or the rich to the poor. It doesn't matter. You have to ask yourself, well, okay, what you really got to ask yourself is why are these people poor in the first place? And look, I'm sorry, it's not always that they have some unfortunate circumstance that they lose their job or they have a child that's has some kind of disorder, disease that makes things expensive, right? That's not always the case. When that is the case, that's, tragic. But, we have things like, the GoFundMe. We have, you can just, in the day and age of the internet, you can literally PayPal someone money, right? These are way better methods. They're not predicated on violence. They're not predicated on theft. These are just better methods, and I don't agree with the idea of SNAP. I'm sorry. Again, it just keeps people in this cycle. Okay, final thing I want to talk about today before we wrap up. I know it's kind of a shorter episode, but I mean, it's been kind of a slow couple weeks, I feel like, in terms of the news cycle and government stuff. Actually, I got one more thing to talk about after this, so maybe a little longer, but not really a whole lot's been going on. Trump's been kind of just doing the same Trump shit. Like, I talked about the whole thing with Thomas Massey. It doesn't really seem like that's changed at all. So, I mean, really, this Iowa stuff's really the only thing that caught me. I mean, that's why I decided to do an episode today, because I was like, oh, well, there's a lot of stuff going on in the Iowa government right now. But there just hasn't really been a lot going on, so short episode. But anyways, so one thing that I saw that was really positive. Mississippi is eliminating state income tax. I cannot emphasize how big of a win this is for Mississippi. Putting money in people's pockets. Their check, I mean, not even putting like their checks. It just is always made so much more sense to me to let people during COVID, right? When they had the stimulus checks, I always even back then I argued like, how about you just not make people pay taxes? Like, maybe not all taxes, even income tax. Even if you were like, hey, we're going to cut into income tax for this year since this virus is going around and it's impacting people's lives. Like, we'll just, if we really care about our citizens, if we really care about the people, we'll just let you keep that money this year. But no, they didn't do that. What did they do instead? A lot of times they raise taxes. I think COVID was the biggest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich, in human history. And, it's just a crazy thing that we're seeing, that we saw happen, where people thought that it would make sense for people to still buy into taxes and then just get like a little scrape, a little crumble. And you know what that did? It just printed money and then it devalued everything. Part of the reason you see prices are so sky high is because of those stimulus checks. It's insane that like you'll talk to people who are protesting about this and then they'll be like, we need another stimulus check. And it's like, it's such a slap my head moment. I'm like, are you retarded? Are you retarded? Do you know what what? You don't see what just happened? But no, they'll equate it to Ukraine or whatever. They'll give some bullshit reason why the money's actually devalued. And it's actually very simple. It's because the government printed a bunch of money during COVID, and that made everybody fucking poor in the years to come. So for Mississippi to do this is a huge win. This is something Donald Trump has talked about doing federally. It's presidencies take a while. Government is the slowest moving body in history. So, I knew when Trump was in office that these things were going to happen day one, right? A lot of stuff did happen day one, but like something like completely cutting out income tax, there's going to be a lot of people in government that are obviously going to be opposed to that because that's their bottom line, right? That's how they get paid. So this is huge. Again, going back to Iowa, if Kim Reynolds actually cared about the people, she would do something similar to this. She very well could. Mississippi is a Republican. Similar to Iowa, like a very heavy Republican center. We have a Republican. Donald Trump is the Republican president, and he's floating this around. This is a very popular idea. Like there's all the space available for Kim Reynolds to just say, hey, we're going to cut out income tax too. Like, people wouldn't really oppose that, I don't think. Maybe the people who rely on these SNAP benefits and stuff. But for the majority of people, they're going to be like, yeah, I get more money in my pocket. Fuck yeah, I'm going to take that. But again, it just shows that she doesn't give a fuck. So I just find this really interesting. These are the things that give me hope. I know I was just saying, how Iowa's becoming a dystopian nightmare. I do believe that. Excuse me. But when you see these other things happening in Mississippi, in the federal government, it does kind of give me some hope. It just kind of gives me some hope that, maybe more people are waking up to this. Maybe more people, maybe these things will actually happen. Maybe the government will actually roll back some of its mandates, roll back some of its power, and give more power to the people. And, ultimately, I don't want any government, right? But I understand also that's an unrealistic expectation. So when it's rolled back, you have to congratulate that. You have to say, good on these people for passing this, despite whatever other evils they may be doing in government, right? Like Reagan, right? A good example with what happened in the Soviet Union, right? He did a very positive thing he was a huge influence in taking down the Soviet Union. But, then his whole thing with the war on drugs is it's just awful. I mean, it's almost hard to give him credit when you paint that picture also, right? How just, the ridiculous increases in prison sentences for drug use, basically a fear tactic, right? But, you have even somebody like Trump, right? Trump, who is probably a pedophile. He was good friends with Epstein. He's done. I don't agree with the border stuff. I think it's just a flawed idea, and it just it tears people away from their families, their home. People who came illegally, but this is their home, right? They grew up here. You're just gonna take them away. I mean, and these aren't people who are violent criminals. These are people who contribute to society. They work a job. They work a job, they take their income, and then they go disperse into other businesses, right? It's a continuing pool of income and wealth that everybody profits from. But then we're just going to take those people away just because they didn't do the proper legal paperwork. Yeah, get the fuck out of here. But Trump did that, right? But he also freed Ross Ulbricht. He freed the January 6th protesters. He is, I think what was it, a couple weeks ago, he is taking a bunch of steps to dismantle the Department of Education, which is a huge fucking win. Oh my God, talk about a waste of tax money. But that, you just got to take the good with the bad, right? And that's not giving these people credit. That's not saying that these people are saints. But when you're in a position of power and you do the right thing, it's important to talk about. Okay, last thing we're going to talk about. I don't really have anything pulled up for this. It's kind of yesterday's news. I don't know. It's probably something that next week we're going to see more of. I also just don't really care that much, but I thought I would still comment on it. Apparently, over this last week, there have been there's been some messages that have been leaked. In a Signal group chat, which for those who don't know is kind of it's similar to WhatsApp or one of those kind of third party messenger boards, right? Or messenger apps. So there were, I think JD Vance was in it. There were probably some other there were other government officials in that chat. Who was the guy? Tim Walt, not Tim. Was it Tim? Something Waltz, I don't remember, but I remember I was watching a podcast and seeing a clip of him talk, and they were kind of already breaking that down. So I don't want to get too muddled on that. But again, I think that podcast, the Part of the Problem podcast, which I listen to that podcast all the time, and then I really try to not just repeat what I heard, right? I think that's a hard part when you're a podcaster is you listen to all these political podcasts, and then it would be really easy to just say, oh yeah, I'm just going to repeat what they did. Right. So it's really hard to not do that. But so I try to give, when I do that, I try to at least give the podcast credit. But I think they articulated it very well where it's the main, glaring issue of these chats is that they want to bomb Yemen. They want, they're talking about all these strikes they're going to do. Right. And so basically this group chat got leaked by a member of the press, and, people are going crazy over it. Right. Which is, literally, I think there was a Jon Stewart bit on this I just read or saw a couple weeks ago where it's every president since Clinton or Obama, it was Obama or Clinton or one of those presidents, like every single president has bombed Yemen. So it's like, it doesn't matter if it's a Republican or Democrat. It just seems like if you're in government, in a federal government position, you're going to bomb Yemen. I'm not really educated on all the history on that, so I apologize. Why do I do this podcast, people? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the most egregious thing out of it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, also it's just kind of reckless to be. It's kind of similar to the Clinton email scandal, right? Where it's like it's just kind of reckless to be like okay, you know, you guys are like having all this, you know, quote unquote secretive government information, which I don't think should be that way. But like, if you're gonna take it from that position, it's like, why the fuck are you doing it on a Signal chat? Like, don't you guys have like a White House email? It probably sucks. That's, you know, that's another really funny aspect of this too, right? Is like this just proves why the free market's better. they're not using a government app. They're using a private app to communicate. Probably because whatever the government could create would just be worse and just not work as well. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the bottom line, the worst part aspect of that is just the fact that they are taking military action against Yemen. And, you know, with the stuff with Israel, that is undoubtedly the most problematic part of Trump's presidency, is how he's going to handle the Israel stuff, how he's going to handle the Middle East in general. This is why, I mean, this is ultimately why I think me and a lot of people did not vote for him, because he's just always going to be like pro-Israel. And it's also very troubling, not even troubling, but like it's just also kind of insane to see all these MAGA people they're just brainwashed, right? Like they're, you know, if you have like a base of people who are really religious and just, you know, just bow to God and bow to Jesus no matter what, right? Like, yeah, of course they're going to put that same mentality into government. And, you know, Trump is the modern Jesus. He really is. They might as well fucking just take out Jesus Christ and just replace him with Donald Trump. I mean, that'd be accurate beyond anything else. But like, yeah, I mean, I just think it would be more applicable. You see those paintings of him and Jesus, like, he's looking better than Jesus. That's for sure. All right, I think that's where we're gonna wrap it up for today. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully I have more content soon. We got Obs coming on the podcast in a few weeks. I'm going to try to make some of the guests work. In the meantime, we're going to keep doing game streams. I've been having a fun time with like GTA and some of the Rockstar games. That's kind of just what I've been into lately. If you guys have any games you want me to play, you'd be interested in watching, please put it in the comments. I'll definitely give it a check it out. And as always, make sure to give this hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share, tell your friends, all that bullshit. We have a Patreon. I need to put more content on it, but if you want to support the channel, that's a great way to do it. So go check that out. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Peace.